Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast, hosted by Michael Colligan and Mark Baker. On today's show, we are pleased and honored to be joined by Chip Israel. Chip has been a lighting designer for over 39 years. In 1992, he founded Lighting Design Alliance, a full-service architectural lighting design firm, where he built a highly selected team of lighting design professionals who now serve a variety of clients worldwide. As co-CEO and founder, Chip works closely with the owner, design team, and the manufacturers to ensure lighting systems are fully integrated with architectural design and enhance the designer's concepts. He has been elected as fellow of both the IALD, which is the International Association of Lighting Designers, and the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society. Chip has received the Pennsylvania State University College of Engineering's highest award, the Outstanding Engineering Alumnus Awards, and Martin's Professional Lighting Designer of the Year. Chip currently serves on IES committees and is past board of directors and past president of the IESNA, which is the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America. Chip is also past president of both IALD Education Trust and the Design Lighting Forum of Los Angeles. Chip is committed to promoting excellence in lighting design through education. As a leading industry spokesman, he has presented technical papers and educational seminars in over 17 countries and lectured in dozens of universities. Lighting Design Alliance has also been recognized by winning over 300 national and international design awards, including multiple awards for sustainable lighting design. We want to find out more about what sustainable means to Chip, because that's an interesting question, and we'll get to that in a second. Before I get there, I want to talk to you about Mark Baker's foundation, which is the Soft Lights Foundation. Go to softlights.org, and you're going to find out there's a lot of research there. There's a lot of stuff that Mark does and his group does surrounding some of the issues that LED lighting presents to people, particularly people that are disabled by LED light. And also the Lighting and Darkness Foundation, which I am the interim executive director of. And if you'd like to be the executive director of this foundation, come and tell me, because this is a volunteer job right now. We're just getting started. But one of our key purposes that we're working on right now is light trespass resolution and mitigation and disputes. And so we have several cases, one before the Rhode Island Superior Court, and we're working on one in Iowa as well, where we're moving out of nuisance, out of ordinance law, and into trespass law. Light fixtures in 2024 can cause trespass. That's right. You can buy a 300-watt fixture online, and you can blast it at your neighbor's property. The lighting industry needs to get a handle on this, and that's what the Lighting and Darkness Foundation exists to do. It's free. We don't charge anybody. We'll help everybody out, including the judges, the lawyers, both sides. We're not on anybody's side. We're not on the plaintiff or the defendant's side. We're on the side of responsible outdoor lighting at night. Lighting and Darkness Foundation, if you want to donate, go to restoringdarkness.com. If you want to help us build a website, contact us and help us build a website. Help us out. We're getting started. I think we're a year started. And so check it out, restoringdarkness.com. Chip Israel, welcome to the Restoring Darkness podcast.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the kind introduction.
No problem. You've been in the game a long time, 40 years almost. Maybe this is an old bio too. Maybe it is 40 years, 39 years. How much has changed, and how much have you learned, and how much did you get wrong over that 40 years? Like as we go forward, how's everything changed?
I think it's changed incredibly. Just technology and now application. So technology, I grew up when, Howard Branson was still pushing incandescent lamps, and they were great sources. I'm not going to ever say that they're not a good source. They're not
Mm,
efficient, but the quality of light that people respond to was actually right on from a circadian rhythm standpoint, but
mm-hmm,
also just the comfort standpoint. We went from that to halogens, a little bit crisper, a little bit whiter, longer life, all those good things, making
mm,
them the first step in sustainability. And then I'm going to call it high quality fluorescent lighting. And these are the triphosphor, the T8s, the
mm,
T5s, the more linear ones. Then we probably took a little step back with the compact fluorescence. The goal was to replace the typical A lamp or the standard household lamp, and the quality wasn't there. They would flicker when they turned on, and they would be greenish tint and the low color rendering. And there was pretty much a pushback from that because the utilities were giving them away, and at the end of the day, people were just throwing them away. That was replaced with the really good, I'm going to call it metal halide lamps, ceramic
Mm,
metal halides.
mm,
They didn't dim and they took 20 minutes to turn on.
mm.
And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this new thing called LEDs came along, and they're smaller, they're brighter, they're glarier. Okay, so with everything, we have to understand the power, but also the problems associated with it. And there was such a rush from manufacturers, both interior and exterior, to take this new technology and shove it into their old form factors. In other words,
Mm.
two by fours, even exterior floodlights. And we forgot everything we ever talked about from a glare standpoint. So if you just take two by fours, we had, you know, flat, lenses, acrylic lenses. Then they were replaced with micro paracubes or small little black louvers, and then deep cell louvers, and then volumetric light fixtures. And a fluorescent lamp's a pretty nice source because it takes that brightness and it spreads it out where the
Mm.
LEDs really concentrates it.
Mm-hmm.
But then we shoved them back into these white boxes with acrylic lenses on the bottom, and we forgot about glare again.
Mm.
Or we took a two by two light fixture, and now we're taking it and making it 4 inches wide or 2 inches wide, and then bragging that we can get 2,000 lumens per foot out of
Mm-hmm.
it. Well,
Sure.
we're now seeing that they're installed for months, years at a time, and we're getting pushback. We're learning that they're too bright. Okay. And it's really where the whole lighting industry was in the 80s. And now we're relearning it again, which is kind of frustrating because we know all of these lessons that they're there. And I'd say the same thing has happened on the exterior too. We went from light fixtures that had very good segmented optics to put in 1,000 LEDs aiming straight down, or worse, taking them and aiming them sideways. So you're really looking into that peak candela and causing glare or issues with it. So technology's changed, and I think what we have to do is pick and choose what works. So I'm saying with the interior analogy, now we're starting to see linear fixtures or pendants with louvers on the bottom. Nothing new. Peerless Light had them in the 80s, but we're coming back and figuring out ways to control glare. The same thing with parking lot fixtures or even pedestrian post stops. We now have soft shine optics. They're still cut off, but they're diffusing the light. And what I would always say that, we design spaces for people. It's probably been amended where we're lighting spaces for everything, people, flora, fauna, Naomi Miller
Yeah, the
called them the little
exterior
critters.
is significantly more complicated than the interior lighting
Right.
systems. I
Well,
want to
it's
I want to ask you just before like that was yeah, you could keep going. We don't even need to interview you. You got to talk about lighting switch on your back. We could flick the
right.
switch and you would
Turn
go.
me off.
Yeah, yeah. But let me focus this back onto the exterior. So you talked about the mistakes made with CFL, and I'm on the distribution side. Okay, so I sell light fixtures over a counter warehouse, and we work with contractors and all that sort of stuff. I think the mistakes we made with CFL are a magnitude, or maybe even two magnitudes worse with the mistakes we made with LED, and particularly in the exterior, these are glaring, and I mean that in terms of the figure of speech, but also in actually. How does the lighting industry step back and admit this problem? Is it time for us to take a step back and say, hey, you know what? There's a lot of bad lighting out there that we did. Is it time for that?
Right. Well, I think there's two things. The answer is sure. We should always be working to try to correct it. And I think the market has done that. In other words, when LEDs first came out, they were 6,000 Kelvin, 8,000 Kelvin, because we were really always chasing efficiency. And now we're getting over 100 lumens per watt. And I think good design basis is more fixtures and smaller output. Okay, and that's really how you create a better design rather than one big glaring light fixture on the side of the building, maybe two or three. Maybe it costs a little bit more, but now you can limit the glare from it and control the optics. We also have another big issue with doing occupancy sensors. And that's a whole question, and I can continue on it. But we lay out light fixtures based upon their photometric output. So, in other words, the IES term of type 5 for symmetrical, type 2 for very lateral, type 3 for forward throw. Those things are how the light pattern would, let's say, look if you're above it in a helicopter or a plane looking down. We now put occupancy sensors in the same fixtures, but they don't have the same broadcast area. They're typically very symmetrical or one-sided. So now we could have, I'm going to call it blind spots on the sensors. So we're always pushing the vendors to come up with occupancy sensors that match the light patterns, or else we're always going to have this blind spot in between the fixtures, which creates a safety issue. And our number one
Yeah,
goal
so this
is
idea of sensors on fixtures is absurd. The sensors need to be connected and controlling an area of light, and
right.
there needs to be a creation of these lighting areas. But before we move on to sensors, I want to step back. So you agree with me, Chip, that darkness restoration, night preservation, dark skies, whatever term you want to use to call what we're talking about here in the exterior lighting, is good for the lighting industry. It means more light fixtures. It means better technology. It means more revenue. Is that correct? Are we agreed on that?
Yeah, there's a term that we've been using for decades. It's called the three rights. The right amount of light in the right location and on for the right amount of time.
Mm.
And the IS has expanded that into 5 points, but it's just
Mm.
using the right amount of light. The idea is the last one, on for the right amount of time. I see occupancy sensors as somewhat troublesome currently. Now, maybe microwave or some of the newer technologies might be a better solution. But to me, there's a great way to guarantee savings, and that's to use, some people call it curfew lighting. That kind of sounds nasty, but maybe we call it eclipse lighting. So the idea is maybe full light is on during peak occupancy, which is maybe dusk to 10 o'clock at night. 10 to 12, maybe you drop the lights to 50%. Midnight to 2, maybe you turn them off, or sorry, midnight to the morning, turn them off or drop them to 10%. I mean, we can see under zero point 0.2 foot candles, but yet why are we lighting these parking lots to, 2 foot candles or 20 lux and things? So I think as an industry, we're learning, and I'll differentiate myself from some people. I like to call it responsible nighttime lighting.
Mm.
We still uplight things, but I want to make sure our uplights hit things, whether it's a sign, a facade of a building, it could even be a tree. What we hate is really broad floodlights that
And it
miss
doesn't need to
everything.
be on at 3 o'clock in the morning as well, right?
Of course, right.
Right. That's another angle. The drunks are seeing it. Before I go to Mark Baker, I
Okay.
just have a couple more questions. I know he's waiting in the wings there, but I want to talk to you about the incandescent light bulb and the halogen light bulb. And so these are actually, in a way, controlled fires. Like we're actually burning something,
Right.
right? So in the act of burning something and then reflecting it onto reflectors, we're almost creating, and this is true for halide, sodium, both sodiums, mercury vapor, you go fluorescent, everything, right? So when we're creating these arcs and these fires, and then we're bouncing the illumination off reflectors, we're mixing this light. It's like a mixer, right? And so the light comes out very much non-lasery. I don't know if there's a technical term for that, Chip, but it doesn't come out like a laser beam. And Mark's concern, and I don't mean to speak for you, Mark, but I just want to bring it from lighting guy to lighting guy over to non-lighting guy here, Mark, because Mark's concerns come from outside the lighting industry. That with LEDs, there's this laser effect, and this laser effect translates to unbelievable glare and light trespass and vision problems, and also affects people with epilepsy and these types of things. How can the lighting industry get away from that with LED, and if so, how do we do that, Jim?
Well, the answer is sure. Once again, an incandescent lamp can be very glaring itself too. That hot
Hmm.
wire in a bottle, everybody loves the old fake Edison type of lamps or whatever. Well, you like them because they're dimmed way down and they look
Sure.
romantic and things.
Yes.
They feel like a gas light, and they could actually be really appropriate maybe on an outdoor lantern too, if they're dimmed down. And I'll say, if you dim them down, they use less energy. Okay, they can be almost as effective, maybe not as efficient as LEDs, but effective, but they also last longer. It's exponentially longer.
Mm.
Dim them 5%, they last twice as long. Dim them 10%, they last 4 times as long. You dim these things down 80%, they'll literally pretty much last forever. And then if you want to look at the entire sustainable aspect of it, they're easier to recycle. They don't have mercury. There's a lot of good of that. Now, I'm not going to go back in time and
Chip
say
Israel's
incandescent
bringing
light.
back the
Yeah,
incandescent bulb. He's
no,
bringing it back. He's bringing it
no.
back.
But it's about anything that you're talking about the projection beams of the LEDs, and I get it. They're striving for efficiency, and now we're starting to look at fixtures that have a diffusion media or an indirect reflector, similar to like what you're talking about. So we take away that piercing brightness, and we can get a softer groove, and it also makes for, to me, better lighting. The problem is we have such tight control, and now we're getting dots of lights in parking lots, or we're
Hmm.
getting streaks of floodlighting on the side of a building because that wasted light was actually pretty good. It would fill in and soften those things. Just best example is like in a big theater, you go in and the ground floor looks all level, then you look up the balconies and you see circles of light. Well, we used to have that spill light that would be beneficial. So I think that it's the designers that ask the manufacturers have to listen, but more importantly, our clients have to be educated of why we're doing this. Like we talked about, more poles, shorter poles. And I'm really big on creating a common language. And unfortunately, lighting is visual. When you say what looks safe, that can be
Mm.
different from you to me. What
Of
looks
course.
bright? So we'd like to get the clients out after dark, which is a pain, right? Because it's nighttime. They want to go home. Everybody wants to have this balance of life and, home and, work as well. But until you take the end users and walk them around and show them good batting and good good lighting and bad lighting, they cannot objectively say what they like. And when they say, oh, I like that feeling over there, then
Mm.
you go through and document it. And then that becomes your threshold because we're so tied into numbers, and numbers are wrong. We've had,
Mm.
you know, a park next to some casinos. They said it must be 2.5 foot candles minimum or
Oh.
25 lux. And we said, you can't do that. And I said, well, but, the theater or the T-Mobile Arena lets out. We're going to have 18,000 people. We need it. So we ended up compromising and put in dimmers. And then we sat there with the police department. We sat there with the ownership as well as their design team. And when we were done, we were under a fifth of a foot candle, or 1/5 of the amount of light they mandated. Now they have the ability through apps and switches to turn them to full bright. God forbid there's ever a panic type situation or a triage situation. And I think that's how we have to design more is push the levels low and low. We still have to be safe, and we have to control brightness. And to me, that's a huge problem because even the IES is looking at how to lower light levels, but then at the same time, we're getting other codes that now say we have to have 10-foot candles, 100 lux on an outdoor staircase. Well,
Where's
when
this?
that
Where is
has,
this crazy making happening?
it's coming out of
That's
some
a
of
lot
the
of light. In
safety.
case anyone that's not a
Yeah,
lighting person listening to that, that's a lot of light on an outdoor staircase. Actually, some
right. Or
staircases
this,
might need it, but most don't.
right, most don't. And even if everything else is, let's say, illuminated to, let's say, a minimum of point 0.2 foot candles or the 2 lux, that's kind of the threshold of vision. And I think we have to do a better job of giving designers options. Like light levels get pushed up because of insurance companies. Insurance companies hate trip and fall, so that when people trip over a curb, they fall down and they say there's not enough light, we add more light. So, but maybe if we have, for example, curb stops, A concrete white curb stop on blacktop is very noticeable. A white curb stop on concrete isn't noticeable. So maybe if we get contrast between curbs and surroundings, we can see better. We can see these obstacles. And we talked about the stairs, swimming pools, or a lot of states now require that 10-foot candle or 100 lux of minimum lighting. So imagine being on your honeymoon in a jacuzzi that's lit to tennis court lights or 5 times brighter than a parking lot. Okay. And there was one accident and people just overreact by dumping more light. And to me, you actually see worse.
There's an
You get
issue
light.
with the legal system and many systems using lighting as the nail to their hammer. You know what I'm saying? Climate change has done this to us. Hey, all you need to do is reduce the most electricity you possibly can. Nail. Boom, we hammered it. Climate change hammer hitting the lighting industry. And the legal hammer, well, there's a crime out there. Well, the answer to that crime is to blast the whole area with all light. And then there'll be
Well,
no crime. And I'll tell you this, Chip, and we got to give Mark a chance because we're 21 minutes in here. But lighting is neither the cause nor the solution to crime. Okay, and lighting is neither the cause, and sometimes it's the solution to some accidents. Sometimes, and that's the most I'll say. Mark
yeah,
Baker, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute,
yeah, I
Mark.
hear
You've
you.
been gone for so long. You're on mute. Uh-oh. He's got to figure it out. You just keep going there. I'll keep talking with Chip until you just
Yeah.
keep going. He'll
Oh,
come back in. So, Chip, comment on that hammer that I was talking about. Why are we, the lighting industry, constantly hammered by these other areas as being responsible for everything? We're the only thing that can mitigate climate change. We're the only thing that can prevent crime. These types of things. How do we get into
right.
that position, and how come nobody is speaking back against it?
Well, I think there's two things. Number one is ignorance and a unified body to kind of fight these things. So I'm going to call it the ignorance is people don't understand lighting. They think of it as just that, I'm going to call it photometric report of numbers on the ground. And a great example is in California. Probably someone got robbed at an ATM. The next thing you know, we have an ATM code. We have to have so much light, 50-foot candles on the face of an ATM, 2-foot radius or 5-foot, 50-foot radius. So how does the end user solve the problem? They put a blinding wall pack right over the
Yes.
ATM. It
Yes.
meets the code, but it blinds every police officer that might be in the neighborhood that could see a crime happening.
Or
So,
causes somebody who's sensitive to LED light to have an epileptic seizure or what have they can't go to that
right,
space because
right.
the light is
So
so
we
blinding.
we have to get away from a numbers documented or way to prove these things are good or bad solutions. And like I said earlier, maybe we have options of way to do it or we mitigate it. Yes, we can minimize light trespass, but I will say that we have these codes, which we're in California, we have very strict Title 24 that talks about exterior controls. All it takes is one person to say, I don't feel safe, and the owner of the property will bypass the system. They'll turn everything to 100% full because they can't afford the liability of a lawsuit just to save a couple of dollars from their point of view. So I'll wrap it up and give Mark a chance to talk. It sounds like
Mark, you
he's
back
back
yet?
live. So,
Oh no!
uh,
Turn off your mute on your mic. We got to bring. Is your mic? Check your mic. Check your computer. Um, okay, so I'm back in charge. Then that's not a problem. Okay, so when you're doing an exterior lighting design program, how does a designer even begin? Like, never mind solve the problem, but
right.
how do we begin taking into account insects, birds, fish, other creatures? Like, how do
Right.
we even start that perspective? Where do we? Where? Chip Israel, you've been in the game 40 years. Where would you even start?
Well, I think the best thing that the lighting industry has done is starting to work together, and they created something called the Model Lighting Ordinance, the MLO,
Jimmy
which
Benya,
was,
Jim
yeah,
Benya.
well, and Nancy Clanton, Naomi Miller, all of
Yes.
these people put together. The first step was to think about this regionally and how much light do you need for that area, not for that commercial classification. Because let's call it a parking lot in zone one, and for the people who don't know about it, zone zero would be a national park service.
Mm-hmm.
Zone one is very, very, let's call it rural. Zone
Wasatch
five is
back
time
Haber
scarce.
City. Wasatch
Right.
back Haber City is a zone one. Yes.
Right. So the whole idea is now starting to think about this is what is the minimum amount of light that you can see? And it works very well because I'm going to call it, your eye has the ability to adapt and to see very well. And it's also forced us as designers to change. I mean, we've done over 60 casinos. We're known for the biggest, multiple billion-dollar casinos, but we're also doing a dark sky reserve project in Saudi Arabia that's the size of Belgium.
Mm.
Okay, so as us as designers, we keep learning how to do our craft better and better. And you said, how does this all happen? Is we need to know the research. We have to educate ourselves as designers, spread that information out, and then these designers can then educate the clients as well as the policymakers. It's not just the people doing the development, it's really the people that are writing the restrictions, the codes, if you will, for those areas all across the country or the world at this point.
Mark, are you in? Or are you out?
I tried it again.
There
Hello?
you are. You're
Yay!
in. Yeah, we got you. We got you.
Well,
All right, good.
brilliant. Okay. Well, hi, Chip. You've gotten me so many questions, so it's impossible for me to ask all of them. I guess, could I ask you a technical question? So, in my efforts to understand this light, and I was not a lighting person when I got into this, but the LEDs have impacted me so much that I had to research and figure out what's going on. So the metric that I came across that I want to talk about is luminance. Previously, you talked about lux, you talked about foot candles, but like an LED display, if you go to a store to buy a television that's an LED television, they say, oh, it's 300 nits. They don't say candela per square meter, they say nits. But obviously, LEDs as a flat surface emitter, that luminance is the density of the light. And this is sort of nowhere. It's not on the packaging of light bulbs, so people who go to the store, they don't know how intense that light is. Uh, and so I'm wondering, in your work, are you using this luminance metric, or is it in the specs? Are you considering luminance? And well, anyways, I guess could you talk about this metric luminance?
Yeah. So I'm going to say for some of the people that may not understand it, illuminance is the amount of light falling onto a surface. So if you have a light meter, that's the easiest way to do it. What you're talking about, the luminance, is how much light bounces off the surface. So it's really easy. If you have a black desk, very little light will bounce off. And I'm going to try to answer your question. You are correct. Most light fixture manufacturers don't call out for, let's call it the brightness of the fixture, not the lumens, which is the amount of light output. But I'm trying to dumbing this down a little bit so maybe I can understand it. But the whole idea is the light coming out, because that's very directionally oriented. And what I would like to say is the really good light fixtures, as well as the really good applications, you work to conceal the brightness of the source. And we say it in our practice, our best lighting isn't when you notice the lighting. You should notice the effect of the lighting. So I think that what we do in house is we get fixtures and we turn them on. It's a pole light. We have two poles in the back. We go out and we mount them on a pole, and we actually evaluate them from a visual comfort level. And then we come back and to use the numbers. And you can use a luminance meter, which some people call a spot meter, but it's more of a gun type of meter that reads that brightness. But the whole idea is, once again, it's that education out there. The nits typically is how bright are digital billboards. And as a lighting, I'm going to call it consultant or expert, we go out and we measure a lot of those. And we find really good ones that are controlled, usually through the dimmers on the systems. But we also have ones that are really obnoxious. And that's why all of these technologies get a bad rap from them, because they need to be bright during the daytime, but they could be toned down during the daytime or the nighttime. Sorry.
I'm wondering if I could ask, like, so we're involved in a lawsuit. It's a light trespass lawsuit, and so
Chip's not going to give
um,
you legal advice, but the
Sure, I will.
conversation
No.
might the conversation
Yeah.
might go. So just to preface that,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mark.
all right, and I'm not even sure I should be talking about it, um, but in the discovery process, the documents that we received said that, well, we don't know anything about luminance. The industry is not talking about luminance, and I want to know, well, what's the
Hmm.
luminance? Because that's the intensity. That's the thing that's causing the seizures and the
Hmm.
migraines
Hmm.
and the panic attack, the loss of motor control is this density of the light. So we know that maybe 300 candela per square meter is pretty bright for a television, right? But that luminance, the density of the light coming out of the fixture from a street light, from a floodlight, or et cetera, it doesn't seem to be on the packaging, and it doesn't seem to be available to anybody in the industry so that they can do their designs. And I'm wondering if, like, is there any effort to try to get luminance
Hmm.
onto the packaging? The Soft Lights Foundation has submitted a petition to the Federal Trade Commission to have that luminance value put onto the package
Hmm.
so that consumers and that lighting designers, that people who are doing the parking lots, whatever, that can see, oh, it's this the intensity, right? And maybe I want to tone it down. So is there any movement in the industry to get that luminance value out there so that people can be aware of it?
I think that for the trained professional, there's ways that you can get that and to calculate it out of a light fixture, but I don't think the general public understands it at all. I
Hmm.
mean, look at CRI. We lived with that for 40 years and now we don't use that metrics anymore. So is there a need for that? I would say definitely there's an opportunity to incorporate it, but it's extremely difficult. Like I said, it is oriented, and I agree with you. The 300 nits might be the minimum amount for a digital billboard, which in a city environment, maybe that's acceptable. We measure over 10,000 nits from LED streetlights, and it's that
Hmm.
incredible intensity. So I fear for the people that have to write the codes, but more importantly, the people that have to enforce them. So maybe
Hmm.
it's really more about shuttering fixtures so that we can keep the light on our property. So then it doesn't matter about the intensity of the source because you're blocking the view of the source.
Hmm.
Does that make any
Chip, I
sense,
agree
sir?
with you. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So I've been working on this and trying to balance that out, right? So you mentioned that maybe there's a luminance meter. I don't think they have it to the sensitivity that is required. So we can't have the code enforcement people going out there and trying to measure the luminance. It's basically impossible. Not impossible, but super hard. So, but the designers can use the luminance to design their fixture properly. But then our codes should say something like fully shielded, or have this curfew thing that you turned off, diffused, right? Those kind of more softer words, so you don't have the numbers. The only number that I've kind of used is the color temperature. So 6,500, 5,000, 4,000, those are too much
No,
blue.
no.
Even 3,000 is too much blue. So we start getting into like where it gets back to comfortable at 2,700K. And we know that, probably amber 2,200K is probably even better. But maybe somebody had an incandescent light bulb. I don't want to restrict them from turning on an incandescent light bulb. So that's the only number I try to use if I'm promoting the idea of responsible lighting. Is just and the other thing that I try to include is, well, disability access. That's the thing that we focus on. So some of us can't get to the store anymore because of LEDs. This is a real problem. So the California Commission on Disability Access, for example, isn't aware of the fact that people are suffering these seizures when exposed to LED lights. So luminance becomes important for restricting it at the design stage, but not after that. If I could transition to another question then for you. So
Oh no,
one
let
of
him
the
answer
things that
that one
we
first. Let him answer that one.
wait,
There's
did
a
I
lot
did?
in there. There's a
Oh,
lot
okay.
in there. Let
Oh,
him go
I
first.
didn't
I
know
want
I
to hear
asked a
what
question.
now I'm viewing this show. I want to hear what Chip has to say so far. Go ahead, Chip.
Well, there's no way you can restrict it because, first of all, you have three different tiers of design, probably. You have professionally designed, I'm going to call it lighting systems, and that's really what it needs to be. It's not only the lighting source, It's the fixture, the luminaire, and the package of how it controls the
Mm.
light out of it. And I
Hmm.
think that every professional practicing lighting designer always strives for that. But then we also have a whole world of other projects that are being designed maybe by people, I don't want to call them, electrical engineers, or I'm not trying to class them all together, but people that are designing the systems that are usually more focused on efficiency.
Mm.
Why? Because historically, that's the challenge that they've had to do in order to meet the codes. And then the last one is people that just say, I want a light. Okay, so the installer, the contractor goes down and buys a light. Well, their labor is expensive. If they buy a very shielded light and you say, oh, it only lit half my parking lot, I told you to get me a light, you know, that's why they always defer to the brighter, glarier light, because to them, it's a light. And going to a lot of site visits, working with punch lists and things, if the thing turns on, everybody thinks it works, even though it may have shielding and other elements to do that. So it really comes back to this educational aspect about always promoting the quality of lighting. That's the biggest problem. And what you were trying to do is to define quality. And that's the hard part. That's why all the codes default back to illuminance, because it's the easy thing that people can kind of check. So that's why I see most of the successful codes are how much illuminance do I have to the property line, and then over the property line, it drops to zero or a tenth or what you've seen incorporated into like lead. And well, these are, I'm going to say, voluntary guidelines, not mandatory, that just really documents good design, right? And that's what we really need to do is have more people
Mm.
understand what lighting is. And we have a huge issue now with substitutions of lighting becoming a commodity. What we design gets basically many times not installed because we go through this value engineering process, which means, oh, I'm going to take your design and I'm going to put in a light fixture and it turns on and we're going to call it good. So we
Mm.
agree. And remember, we had issues with fluorescent lamps and strobing and flickering that caused migraines and other health issues
But
too. So this isn't a
Chip,
new issue.
Chip, as a lighting guy, I would say in the old days we could value engineer. Like, was there differences? Sure, there was. In the age of LED, I don't think anyone knows what they're doing right now, and I don't think there is comparable. Like, if you have a 2x4 troffer with four T8s and a K12 acrylic lens, I mean, that's a 2x4 troffer all day long, no matter who you buy it from,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so if or if even if it has paracube lenses, whatever, we could figure all that out. In the age of LED, there can be massive differences between two fixtures. I want to go back to
Well,
Mark
it was
here.
source based though, but it was
Yes,
source based. So in
that's
other
right.
words, the fixtures varied greatly, but the T8 fluorescent, whatever the fluorescent technology is, yeah, back then you had General Electric, you had Sylvania, and you had Philips. They all had varieties of lamps, from good ones that had high color rendering, maybe a little bit more efficient, to very cheap, cool white and warm white lamps and stuff.
Mm.
And it was how they picked those things, but you had consistency vendor to vendor, and you also had maintainability. Right? When the
Mm-hmm.
lamp went out, you unsnapped the lamp and you put in a new one. If the ballast went out, you took that out. The problem is now we have these integrated light fixtures, whether they're industrial, inside or outside, but they're not three separate, let's call it
It's a piece of
components. The
electronics that
LED,
has to get thrown out when it burns out.
right? But that's the problem. You're throwing away the entire fixture.
That's all I'm
So
saying.
when you said at
Yeah.
the very beginning, what is sustainable? To me, sustainable is future-proof light fixtures. So when a new LED comes out, you snap that out, you snap the new one in. When a better driver comes out, you snap it in and out. Our clients don't want to hear that you have to rip open a drywall ceiling and, it costs literally $500 or $600 of labor to replace one light fixture.
So you're
Nobody's going to
saying
be
we
able
have a
to
lot to
afford.
learn. I agree, Chip. I agree. There's
Yes.
lots to learn about sustainability. Mark, we got one more question. We're coming up on 40 minutes right now, so you got one
Sorry.
more.
Oh
Yeah,
wow,
that's
yeah,
okay.
this really has taken off.
Maybe we need
I
two
guess
calls, so.
Maybe, yeah, we could.
could do it again. One of the problems that we're having is you've talked a lot about the going out and doing the site visit and stuff, and you have clients and stuff. One of the major problems that we're having is that a neighbor will just buy an LED light and now it's blasting their neighbor. These are just regular people, residential people. And they contact me and say, Mark, what am I supposed to do? Well, there's a lot of suggestions I can provide, but there's no bulletproof answer. I say, do you know your neighbor? Yeah, maybe. Are they nice? Do they seem like they're willing to shield their light? No, oftentimes no. If they go over, they'll say, go away. I don't want to talk to you. It's my right, they will say, to use this light. And yet that light is so intense and often, 4,000 Kelvin, 5,000 Kelvin, and it's penetrating the other person's house. It's going into their windows. They're trying to buy blackout shades. It's still coming in. They're trying to plant a tree, whatever. Do you have advice for our viewers for a neighbor to neighbor situation where like there was no designer, they just went to Home Depot and they bought this light and now everything's terrible?
Right. Well, I think for the neighbor, the best thing is we want everybody to be good neighbors, and probably they don't even realize that they're creating a situation to their neighbor. So I think sometimes just literally saying, you know, can I adjust your two par lamps on your back patio and aim them down a little bit? And they're like, well, why? And it says, well, it shoots in my window. And they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. But until we start communicating with each other and talking rather than emailing or sending threatening letters and stuff, just talk and try to find a resolution. I also think as an industry, we need to educate Home Depots, Lowe's. When you go in there and they show a 3K A lamp and a 5K, or they call it natural light and daylight, why are they selling these blue light bulbs, the 5K? Because especially on the outside of a house, they really become that nuisance or that very
Nasty.
glaring light
Hmm.
source. And I think if people buy them, and my sister, I'll make fun of her, she went out and bought them all, and I said, oh, they're awful, and I made her rip them all out, and we went and bought new lamps. Okay, so, but they don't buy it; they buy it because they don't know. Oh, daylight sounds good, you know. So I think we can do a better job of just taking the bad stuff out of the marketplace. Is be the first thing.
And
Yeah, Chip,
I gotta
oh,
close it down here. The final point goes to Mark, and then then
oh.
I get to talk.
Okay, no question, Chip, just a comment. You go into Home Depot and the light is so intense, I have to turn around and walk back out.
There you
So
go.
if the industry could help Home Depot say, well, at least allow your customers to come in the door, that would help. All right,
So
Michael.
Right.
I would say this, and I agree with the education piece, but I think it's the lighting industry that needs to be educated first. And then maybe we could go to Home Depot and other places. I think the lighting is particular with its exterior lighting piece. I don't think anybody truly knows how to light up an exterior environment without causing damage. Now, maybe we'll never get there. Maybe that's part of light is that there's going to be some damage, but I don't think there's a way out. I got so many questions, Chip, on the back of this page here. Like this is ridiculous, but we're trying to keep everything. We've the listeners have told us to keep it to less than 40 minutes, so I got to shut it down. But if there's a neighbor dispute and it gets out of control, you can call the Lighting in Darkness Foundation, and our purpose is that we are the lighting industry. We're not against outdoor light. But we're very much in favor of responsible outdoor light at night. And so we will do an inspection and we'll determine whether a light trespass is actually happening using photometrics and light meters and different things, glare meters, luminance. There's this app on the phone that we just got. Someone told us it shows us the luminance and all this sort of thing. And so we will come and do that. And we're limited to the amount of clients we get, but we haven't spent all the money yet. So if you call now, you can still get it. Or you can donate to make this kind of stuff happen by going to restoringdarkness.com. You can also donate your time because we need a web developer to help us build our website. And you can go to softlights.org for Mark Baker's work. But he hates lighting. I love lighting. This is the Restoring Darkness podcast. That's where we come together. And on behalf of Chip, Mark, and myself, if you've listened to this, if you've watched this, if you've liked this on social media, whatever, however you've engaged with this, we're truly thankful to you. So bye for now and see you next time.